Well done, well done. Great, happy, great. Let's go for it. I need a few more. Come on, put your hands to your keyboard. Do some typing this evening. Happy, thank you, Mr. Femi. Curious, well done. Joyful, I like that name. Grateful, wonderful. Let's have a few more. Come on, let's go for it. We can make this work. Joyful, well done, well done. That's really good. So we would see from this activity that any point in time, either consciously or unconsciously, there is an emotion that we are feeling, and there is a need for us to acknowledge that. And that's the beginning of emotional intelligence. Now, like I said to you, this is going to be a bit chaotic, but I want us to read this nice poem together. So if you can just unmute, I'll tell you the reason why later, but if you can just unmute, I want us to read this nice poem together. Some of you may recognize it, some of you may recognize it as you go along. So we're going to do this on the count of 3. So let's unmute, and on the count of 3, let's read this together. 1, 2, 3.
Over the city,
Unless he watches over the city, the gods stand watch in vain. In vain you rise early and stay up late, planning for food to eat. For he grants sleep to those he loves. Children are a heritage from him. Think from him like arrows in hands of our children born in one youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them, to be put to shame when they contend with their opponent in court.
Amen. Hallelujah. Well done. Well done for reading that. Now, the first question I have for you is, can anyone recognize these words? Where have they come from?
Book of Psalm.
Yeah, from the Bible.
Well
Psalm
done.
127.
Psalm 127. Well done, well done. Is anything missing from this psalm?
Unless except
The Lord.
Yes.
So what's except the Lord does what?
Except the Lord builds a house.
Well done. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builder builds in vain.
In vain.
Well done. That's what was missing from the first one that we looked at. So I want us to really, really understand that in the space of parenting, and especially around emotional intelligence, except the Lord builds with us, we build in vain. So we're going to be learning a few things today, but I want us to put all of that learning into the context of is the Lord that is building our home. In terms of emotional intelligence, the first thing to sort of acknowledge is the fact that the home is being built by the Lord. There are few individuals in this psalm, in this sweet psalm or this poem, like I normally call it. There is the God who can be waiting in vain. There is the me or you that can be rising up early and going to bed late. And there are also the children. And this verse is saying to us that if we are able to position the children in such a way that they are arrows in our hands and we're able to mold them, the children that we have then becomes an inheritance. Isn't that a sweet thing? And God says that there is a reward to it. So as we go into this learning space this evening, there is a reward for us, and that reward is engraved in our children. So I said to you that we're going to be doing a bit of interaction this evening. So we've read together. I now want us to watch together. Remember that we're talking about parenting, we're talking about emotional intelligence, and we're talking about how to ensure that we do this in a way that profits the children, that makes them a reward. So I'm going to play a short clip, and I want us to pay attention to this short clip. I'm going to play from YouTube so that it can be, so that we can hear it more clearly. as I play this clip, I just want you to note in your, I'm hoping that you have a pen and a notebook beside you. I should have said that at the beginning. I just want you to note some points, any learning points that you think would come out of this clip.
The Dot. Written and illustrated by Peter H. Reynolds. Art class was over, but Vashti sat glued to her chair. Her paper was empty. Vashti's teacher leaned over the blank paper. "Ah, a polar bear in a snowstorm," she said. "Very funny," said Vashti. "I just can't draw." Her teacher smiled. "Just make a mark and see where it takes you." Vashti grabbed a marker and gave the paper a good strong jab. "There!" Her teacher picked up the paper and carefully studied it. She pushed the paper toward Vashti and quietly said, "Now sign it." Vashti thought for a moment. "Well, maybe I can't draw, but I can sign my name." The next week, when Vashti walked into art class, she was surprised to see what was hanging above her teacher's desk. It was the little dot, the dot that she had drawn, her dot, all framed in swirly gold. I can make a better dot than that." She opened up her never-before-used set of watercolors and set to work. Vashti painted and painted. A red dot, a purple dot, a yellow dot, a blue dot. The blue dot mixed with the yellow. She discovered that she could make a green dot. Vashti kept experimenting. Lots of little dots in many colors. "If I can make little dots, I can make big dots too." Vashti splashed her colors with a bigger brush on bigger paper to make bigger dots. Vashti even made a dot by not painting a dot. At the school art show a few weeks later, Vashti's many dots made quite a splash. Vashti noticed a little boy gazing up at her.
"You're really a great artist. I wish I could draw,"
he said. "I bet you can," said Vashti.
"Me? No, not me. I can't draw a straight line with a ruler."
Vashti smiled. She handed the boy a blank sheet of paper. "Show me." The boy's pencil shook as he drew his line. Vashti stared at the boy's squiggle, and then she said, "Please, sign it." And that's the end of the story.
So I hope you enjoyed watching that story. I just want to take some learning points. Is there any reflection that has come through that story? Did anything stand out for you in that story? Okay, let's use the chat box. Empowerment. Thank you, Mr. Kemi. Well done. Thank you. A few more responses. Practice makes perfect. Well done. Well done, sis. Any other thoughts? Encouragement. Well done. Courage, encouragement, confidence. That's it. Encouragement. Thank you. Boldness. This is great. Believing in yourself now. the purpose of today in terms of discoursing emotional intelligence, celebrating every small thing, seeing beyond the visible. This is the experience of emotional intelligence. Yes, we'll be learning some principles today, but I want you to just reflect and hold on to the fact that what dot in your child's life, in my child's life, which seems insignificant, would we be able to celebrate with them, to bring them into a place of confidence, into a place of courage? What is that dot? So each time you actually look at your child, the key thing that should be on your mind is, where is that dot? It's not the big things. The big things would come, but every big thing starts with a small dot. So that's the first thing that I want us to hold on to as we go through the rest of the PowerPoint presentation. Just going to share my screen again, and then we'll go from where we stopped. So we have talked about some emotions in the story: confidence, empowerment, so many, courage. I saw that in the chat box and things like that. What I would want you to do, which I have said a bit of, is our own emotions. If we were in the story, how would our emotions plan out? So would we sort of look at our child and say, is that all you could do? Was it just that little dot that you could do? Couldn't you do more? Let's think about our emotions in that sense, because when we come to discussing emotional intelligence, there is no way that we can discuss emotional intelligence without discussing our emotions. And I know that sometimes, first of all, I want to thank God, because I've seen a lot of men on this platform, which is a very good thing. But sometimes I know that when we talk about emotions, I don't want to be politically incorrect, but sometimes I think we sort of see that as maybe things that have to do with crying, things that have to do with being weak, things that have to do with not being strong. But our emotions are actually a gift from God to help us tune into emotional intelligence, and as a result of that, make us be better persons. And the reasons why I have just highlighted a few verses in the Bible is to show us that emotions is deeply rooted in the Bible. We are spirit-led people, and God has given us our emotions so that when our spirit starts to, when we allow our spirit to lead our emotions, we as Christians get into a stage of emotional plus, and we're able to facilitate great outcomes for our children. When we talk about emotional intelligence, there are two things that matter. The first one is, who am I? Who am I in the space of self-awareness? And the second one is, what do I do? So when we relate this to our children, the two key questions that we should be writing down or noting this evening is, who is my child and what does my child do? In the place of recognition, we're talking about self-awareness. So in the place of that awareness, there are two blocks of awareness that counts. The first one is self-awareness. It's being able to say to ourselves, I know this child, and I know this child in a way that I know and understand their moods, I understand their emotions, and I understand their drives as well. And I understand what affects or what influences that. So that's the first stage. And then the second stage is that the child themselves, you should be able to work with the child in such a way that the child will be able to say, I know myself, I know my moods, I know my emotions, I know what drives them, and I know the effect that my mood or my emotions have on others. That's the first stage of self-awareness. The other stage in terms of awareness is for us to be able to say, now that I know myself, I have an understanding of what emotional intelligence is when I interact with people. So when I go to school, I know how to behave in that setting. When I'm at home with my siblings, I know how to behave in that setting. When I'm in church, I know how to behave in that setting. When my parents are not there and I'm on my own, I know how to behave in that setting, because the child now has an awareness of themselves. So when we say to ourselves and our child, have an awareness of yourself, the starting point is we're actually saying, recognize the emotions that you have and how that emotions are driving your actions. And that brings us to the second part of the equation when we talk about emotional intelligence. That part of the equation has to do with actions, regulations. What do we do? So when we look at the self bit, we're saying, because I now know myself, because I know the way that my emotions work, how does my emotions prompt my actions? How does it prompt my response to the way that I live my life? How does it prompt my response to mommy waking me up in the morning at 7 o'clock? How does it prompt my response to the fact that I have siblings? How does it prompt my response to the fact that I need to go to school? How does it prompt my response to the fact that I need to interact with friends? So that self-awareness and the child's emotion is what then tells us how the child will regulate themselves. The same thing in the social sphere. So once the child understands how emotions work, the child has an awareness and knows how to control their own emotions. The child is able to then work with people in social gatherings. They could see someone and sort of say, that person is upset. That person is feeling down. How can I empathize with that person? They could see someone and sort of think that person is in an angry space now. How can I sort of withdraw so that I don't escalate the issue? Which means that the child has now transferred their social awareness into social skills. And basically, that's the summary of emotional intelligence. How we become aware of ourselves, how we become aware of the society that we live in, how we manage ourselves within that, and how we manage the relationships that we come into within our networks and the society that we live in. How does this fit with our brain? Now, this is a very important one for us as parents. I always say, when we talk about emotional intelligence, look at it as if you're teaching a child, or we're teaching ourselves how to drink tea. And what do I mean by that? It's like picking a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and sort of, I would rather use tea. And then we say, I'm actually drinking tea. The reason why I say to people, refer to it as a cup of tea, is because emotional intelligence goes from the thoughts that we have into our emotions, and then there is an action. So that's why it's tea. So it goes from the thoughts that we have into our emotions, and then there is an action. So how does this work? It starts with a voice. So look at this. God is so good. Look at this on the left-hand side. You can see how complicated our brain is. For each and everyone on this platform, God has given us this type of brain. For those of you that might be in the medical field, doctors and nurses, even psychologists, you can relate to the fact that this is the brain of a human being. Look at how God has just neatly woven everything together to be in that shape. Now, when we translate this complex brain into the emotional space, there are 3 levels that happens. There's the voice level. That's where we hear things that come into our mind and our head space. So when we hear that voice comes in, and that voice is influenced by things like maybe our upbringing, our genetics, our values, negative voice, the genuine voice of love. That voice is coming into our minds that way. Now, we then have the second layer of the brain in the emotional intelligence world, and we call this the emotional space. The emotional space is like a computer. So all of the things that we do is being stored in the emotional space. The emotional space is our reaction space. Now, I want to put it to you that 80% of what you do in life, what I do as well, when we are in our unintentional space, is happening in this space. So we're not even processing what we do. I'll give you an example. So we step into the car, we want to drive the car. We're not sort of thinking, where do I put the key? How do I put on the ignition? Where do I press the brake if it's a manual car? We automatically go into auto drive because there have been files saved in that element of our head. So when an action happens, we immediately can trigger. Our brain is helping us, so our brain just immediately triggers a reaction. This is why sometimes when we're talking to our children, there's an immediate reaction. They're not even thinking about what we are saying because the brain is immediately going into their archives and processing these things. And we can even find this in babies. You know, sometimes when our babies start to talk and we're laughing at what they say, maybe when we say things to them and they're just saying, no, 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 no. And we're sort of thinking, oh, this baby is so funny. This baby is not even listening to what I'm saying. That baby hasn't even moved past any other bits. That baby is firmly dwelling in this emotional state. You know, there are times when someone gave me an example of this where an individual had lived in a particular area for about 16 years, moved out over the weekend to another place, and then the Monday morning, this person went to work. When this person was going back to work, they went to the old house because they had been so used to going to that old house. They went into autopilot, picked up the key for their new house and was trying to open the door. When the new person came out and said, why are you trying to open my door? That was when that person realized that they were operating in their emotional space. Most of the time, as human beings, we operate in our emotional space. And in our emotional space, we are not responding, we are reacting. So when our children are operating in their emotional space, they are not responding. They're not responding to what we are saying to them. They're not responding to what is happening in school. They're actually just reacting. In that emotional space, people live in it for life. Now, can that emotional space, as much as it is useful, does it give us the best in terms of emotional intelligence? No, because it's the analytical place in our brain that actually brings out the best in us. Now, what brings us into that emotional, the analytical space? That's the question that we want to sort of find out. What will help my child operate at least 80% of the time in this analytical space? Because if the child is operating in the analytical space, you will get more responses from the child. The child will be a more happier child and the child will be more fulfilled. I suppose the greater question for us is, are we as parents operating in our analytical space? Because if we're not operating in our analytical space, then we can't even get our children to come into that space. Now, I just want you to take a view of this diagram, which I normally use to help us define the child. I always say to parents, our children are colorful children. And when I saw this, this is not something that I have put together. It's something that it's out there. You could Google it, you would find it. I've just put the voice T onto it. When I saw this, I sort of thought this is so appropriate for our children. You see, our children sometimes will come across as red. And when they're in their analytical space, that red will come across as assertive, ambitious, driven, strong-willed, decisive. So you could actually see all the positive reds that's happening in that space. Now, there are times when they would be in their emotional space. And when they're in their emotional space, the adjectives on the left is what you would see. So you will see the child being confrontational, aggressive, and things like that, that child is still the same red child, but that child is operating in their emotional space, rather than their analytical space. Now, it could be that a child is somehow more yellow. So first of all, a bit of some explanation. No child is fully one color. But as you look at this color, you probably would sort of be thinking, my child is more of a green, my child is more of a blue, my child is more of a yellow, but the colors interact with each other. And there are times where the situation would allow the child to come into a specific color. So the child might be operating as a yellow child, a colorful child. In that analytical space, see all of the wonderful things that they will be able to do. In that same space, in an emotional space, see what they will be able to do. A yellow child that has been brought home, you have the right environment in the home to create this warmness, this the child feels warm and everything. The child goes into the school, gets into a place with some friends and things like that, and they start to then operate in the emotional space of that yellow. You can see that the child can fluctuate from one or the other. And sometimes that's why sometimes when we go to Parents Teachers Association meeting and they say to us, this is what our child is doing, we'll say, how can that be? Because I've seen the child in the home is operating in another dimension. So I just want you to look at those colors and start to think about your child, your children, and start to think, how does my child operate? What side is my child operating in? Because when you look at this left-hand side of the screen, wherever the child operates is being driven by a voice. And I thank God that this is a Christian platform, so I will just be quite blunt about how voices work. The child could be hearing some very negative voices, which would then mean that the child is being influenced by that voice. The child could also be hearing some very logical voices. Again, the child will be hearing those voices and will be operating in that realm. Or the child could be hearing some joyful voices, which would help the child be in an analytical space at all times. I'm sure no one on this platform would disagree with me that the more positive things we say to our children, the more they will be able to operate in their analytical space. Now, in order for us to be able to say positive things to our children, we must first know those positive things, and we must sign up to them as things that we want to actually use as the dominant voice in our children's life. So I want us to go into the parent space and then ask ourselves, in our own emotional space, are our emotions being served, or are our emotions serving us? There are different stages in emotional awareness. And until we are able to start to get to either level 3 or level 4 or level 5, emotional intelligence in the parent space cannot happen. So if we as parents are not aware of our emotions, how our emotions are affecting ourselves, that means that we are not aware. Because we are not aware, we can't self-regulate ourselves. Because we cannot self-regulate ourselves, we can't let the loudest voice of joy come through for our children. And because we cannot do that, there are times that our children will fluctuate in and out of their emotional intelligence space. Believe God has given every child this gift. This gift is in us by reason of the Holy Spirit. The Bible says that we are sealed by the Holy Spirit by reason of that child being from your loins. The Holy Spirit, it dwells in them, and by that child actually has emotional intelligence. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but when you get the slides, do go through this, because it talks about the different voices. It talks about the thoughts that would come through different voices, and it talks about the seed that is then planted. So when you look at it, you can see that when we go from a seed of negative voices, which would have come through the voice of the enemy, we'll find out that there are times when we as an individual, this is nothing to do with the child, we as an individual have seeds that don't reflect emotional intelligence. And because we have those seeds, the voice that we are placing on our children is the voice which then moves them into an emotional state more than an analytical space. So what we need to do, try to do at all times, is to ensure that we're feeding our children with a joyful voice. This again is a parent's list. How do you as a parent, before we get to the child, how do you get into that space? We get to a space of stillness, we're reflecting, we're connecting, we're welcoming the Holy Spirit, we're listening, and then we're doing things that move us closer to the Holy Spirit. When we get to that state, we can then say, yes, as a parent, I can now start to explore emotional intelligence with my child. Now, how do we do this? We do this in a few ways. First of all, we track the voice of the voice that our children are hearing. What voice are they hearing? What voice are our children hearing? We track that voice to make sure that the voice that our children hearing is the right voice. Okay, thank you very much. Once we then do that, we then need to start to recognize the feelings of our children, and then we need to start to validate those feelings. We then need to look into the strengths of our children. Where are their strength points? How can I glide on the strengths of my child? And finally, we then need to come into the position where we're always problem solving with our child. 5 steps, sorry about the mistake there. So we're tracking the voice, we're recognizing their feelings, we're helping them to walk through their feelings, we're looking at their strengths, and we're problem solving. So how do we do this? The first bit of doing this is acknowledging with the child that every emotion is all right. It's okay to be angry, it's okay to be sad. But what we don't want them to do is to embrace that and live in that emotion. So we want them to be able to name their emotion, to acknowledge their emotion. And then we want to ask the question, why do you feel this way? Why do you feel this way? You know, the question of why with our children is really, really important. And then we can then say to the child, do you want to choose another emotion for today? Do you want to choose the emotion of joy? So that's the first thing that we can do as parents to heighten emotional intelligence in our children. Now, a few more things that we can do. We can think about the moments that matter to them. So when we are with our children, when we are with our children and we're speaking with our children, there would be moments that have mattered to them, moments that may have brought them joy, moments that may have brought them happiness. And we discuss those moments with them, you know, purposely. You remember the time we went on a holiday, how did you feel about it and things like that? You remember that you are good at this. You remember that this is your strength. We help our child find out about their strengths, and we speak to them from the position of strength. You know, I know that we all want our children to do well in every subject. It's virtually impossible. What we need to do is to actually identify what they're good in, praise them for it, and get them to do more of it. The next thing that we need to do is to check out the values of our children. There are moments that will drain them. Maybe they are stressed, they're having issues with friendship in school. They might not want to tell us what that is. They might even be having issues with siblings. Maybe they feel that one sibling is being loved over another. That would start to influence their values. There will be values that would start to come out that would not be the values that would promote their emotional intelligence. So again, we need to look at those moments that they feel drained. What exactly is causing that drain? And we need to explore that space based on values. You know, I say that you could set your emotions in your home. You could decide that in this home, we're doing joy. So when your child comes back and they're not doing joy, you don't sort of say, why aren't you doing joy? You sort of say to them, what has happened? Let's go through the emotional wheel. I'll share an emotional wheel with you. Let's go through an emotional wheel. What has brought you into the feeling that you are currently feeling? Because remember the first words that we talked about at the beginning, self-awareness. They need to be self-aware about their emotions. The more you talk about their emotions with them, the better for them. You know, monitor when the child has low energy. When the child has low energy, they are obviously in the emotion space of their brain and not in the analytical space of their brain. Measure when they have high energy. High energy does not necessarily mean high emotional intelligence, because high energy could mean that they are jumping up and down and things like that. Monitor that as well. Help them to get into a place of reflection. Help them to get into a place of journaling. There's so many journals around now, Bible journals, journals about how to build confidence, so many journals around. I have a journal for children about emotional intelligence. These are journals that you could work with them with and say to them, let's really explore this space. But most importantly, speak the language of love onto them. You know, don't see, when we were young, you know, if our parents sort of say, I love you, it would seem odd, but that doesn't seem odd anymore. Let's spend a lot of time saying that we love them, even when they are not doing things that we're not happy with. Let's still speak the language of love onto them, because remember that when we're talking about that T, the emotion, the thought, emotion, and action, the starting point is the voice that the child hears. This is a wheel that I always use for my children. I sort of say to them, how are you feeling? How are you feeling today? Tell me how you're feeling. And you can track emotional intelligence this way. If they say to you, I'm feeling sad, you know, you can then go one step further. Why are you feeling sad? Let's do it. Is it because of all of these reasons? Is it because you are bored? Is it because there has been, you felt inferior in school and things like that? If you are feeling peaceful, what's the next level down? So you keep on digging and digging, because if, for example, the child says to you, I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling mad, and you say, I rebuke it in the name of Jesus, that's a good strategy. But an additional strategy, emotional plus, would be that whilst you are rebuke it silently. Don't tell the child that you are rebuking it, but start to explore with the child what layer has caused this sadness. Because by the time you get to the last layer that has caused the sadness, you would recognize where the voice is coming from, and you will be able to stop that voice. You'll be able to move that child from a place of being emotional to a place of being analytical. So I have a book that I use for children that you can get on my website. It's a journal, and you can walk through your children using this journal. I accept the fact that there are times that children might need additional professional support. Let's not move away from that fact. There are times that maybe there might be some imbalances within the system of the child that's bringing them into the mood. So when we find out that these are things that go beyond just that we've shown all of these things and this child is still responding somehow, then we need to seek professional help. There are times that maybe children might be on the spectrum, and then they might not be in a position to exhibit, you know, that colorful child on the right hand side that we want. So we just need to be aware that in doing all of these techniques, we actually have to do more. But I think I would want to leave you with where we started from in reading that Psalm. You know, that Psalm that we read at the beginning, Psalm 1 to 7. You know, that Psalm says, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. So the starting point really is for us to be building this house that we're building with God. And as we build with God, He will give us more strategies to move our children into an emotional intelligence space. It's so important, because when the child gets into that space, there's so many wonderful things that they can do. You know, a child that is in an emotional intelligence space is better prepared to work with friends. They are better prepared to face up to challenges. They have more resilience. They will do better in school. They will have better habits. They will build more proactive relationships. And more importantly, they will be showing Christ even at a young age. People would see them and say, there's a difference. There's a difference here. And we can do that by working with our children in this way that I have just shared with you. God bless you.
Cook and enroll people to book and cook.
I will stop now and pass back to Reverend for questions that any of us may have.
Thank you so much. As you were sharing, I was taking some notes. Thank you so much for such a full, presentation. You have packed so much into the 30 minutes that you have shared with us. And I'm happy that you are willing to share the slides with us so that we can actually have time to really go over it and, chew it. I especially like that emotional wheel that you showed, that showed when a child has a certain, to keep asking questions, to dig down into it. So thank you so much for such a very insightful presentation. To just show to ask, to participants to ask questions, along what has been, so that has a question, please, you can just raise up your hand and our facilitator will be more than glad to answer your questions. Any question you have said? I'm looking at the chat. I don't. Okay, Folake Oduswanya has a hand up. Folake, can you unmute yourself and ask your question quickly?
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Auntie Wande, for this beautiful presentation. So I heard when you were talking, you said something about identifying the areas that our children are good at and praising them or encouraging them. But I have a son that plays the piano very well. He plays it so well, but all of a sudden he just decided to stop playing it. He says he doesn't like it anymore. He's not interested in it, but he's played it for so long and everybody knows he's very good. But now he just doesn't want to play it anymore. So what do we do in that kind of scenario? What do I do as a parent?
Okay, so two things. First of all, when we say that someone is good at something, we need to distinguish if that person is good at it out of practice or out of strength. If I say to you now, pick up a pen, and we can all do this as an exercise. If we all pick up our pens and we signed our name with our preferred hand, can we all do that, please? Well done. And then we put our pen in our non-preferred hand, and then we sign our name. How did that go? It didn't go smoothly. Did it? Okay. But heavens forbid, if, for example, my right hand gets chopped off, you know that I can perfect how to sign my name with my left hand. Does that mean that that's my preferred option? It might not be. So a child may have learned a particular skill because they have been introduced to it as a child, they have perfected it and things like that. Does that mean that that's their preference? Not necessarily. So I would say give the child a break. Don't put them under any pressure. When we talk about the emotional wheel, because we don't have a lot of time to really go through the emotional wheel. But when we talk about the emotional wheel, there's a place of stillness where when we're in a situation like this, we have to come to a place of stillness and we say to the child, let's give it a few weeks. I can assure you, first of all, the fact that it's a skill, that child is never going to forget how to play the piano because they're already secured in learning it either as a right hand or a left hand. Now, if it's a right hand skill, it could be that they're under pressure. Maybe they're sort of thinking, oh, everyone's looking at me. You need to go into the underlying reasons of why you don't want to play it again. But I would say to you, put no pressure on that child. Just leave the child for now, and the child would come back to it if it's a right hand strength. If it's a left hand strength, it will be something that they know to do, but they wouldn't necessarily be hungry to do it.
Very much, Sister Wande. Just to help parents on this call this afternoon. For emotional intelligence to flow very well in a parent-child relationship, it has to be symbiotic, right? Where it's a two-way thing. Both of them are givers and takers. But based on parenting experience that a lot of parents on our platform, on our group, have been challenged with, there are a lot of children that are non-communicative. They are just taciturn. So in a situation like that, where the parent is trying to reach out and connect with the child is not really responding, rather prefers to keep to him or herself, what tools can one use to break that barrier?
So I would suggest, and I don't want to, I would suggest the love language. We need to love our children into loving us, because we need to understand that when a child starts going to school, they spend more time in school than they spend in the home environment. And if the school is such that they become more comfortable, if the child stops communicating in the home, when they become more comfortable in a space outside of the home. Now, that space could be a physical space like the school. It could be a virtual space like a play game. It could be social media. It could be things like that. But a child will stop communicating, not because they don't love the family or they don't love us anymore. They stop communicating because they have found a preference to what we are offering. So, you said that parenting is a two-way thing. Marriage is a two-way thing. Parenting is a one-way traffic. You go for it like never before, because you're sort of thinking, if we're sort of saying, I will wait for this child to give birth back, we might be waiting for a very, very long time. There are things that we might need to sort of say to the child. Do you want me to repaint your room? Do you want to go and do an activity together? Anything that would make the child understand that you actually love them is very, very key. Basically, you need to see the other influences as competitors, and you want to have the best product. You want to have the shiniest product so that your child will not be distracted. So you try everything possible. You love that child into a place of love. And then more importantly, because this is a Christian platform, I keep on saying, you pray over that child. A child that has gone to school is engaging with friends in school and is not engaging. When the child is away from school, go onto their pillow, speak life onto their pillow. The next time you put your head on this pillow, you will love us. The love of God will come through. You will see us as parents that are loving, And there's some things that sometimes people might sort of think, oh, we're spoiling the child. But we're not spoiling the child. There are sometimes where you just sort of say to the child, let's have fun together. There's a place for home walking, bringing the child up like an African and things like that. There's a place for that, and I thoroughly respect that. but just let the child be in a happy home. Let them know that they've got you covered. You know, every my daughter who is 25, she's still at home. And people say to me, how come she's still at home? She's graduated, she's a dentist, and she's still at home. But she can't leave because the comfort that I give her in the home is so much a deal for her to God's glory, for her to step out of the house, because you just need to make them comfortable. And when you then do that, you know, they return love. They don't return duty. You want them to return love to you.
Thank you very, very much. I hope all the parents in the house are hearing the onus is on us as parents to make the relationship work. It's not so much as it is on our children than it is on us to make that relationship work. Yeah, Pastor Ronke Fabumi, your hands are raised. You want to ask a question?
Yes, I do. And thank you so much for this, for everything that's been said. But I just want to.
So you're breaking up, ma.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah, where the child kind of lost interest in the piano playing, and it was just going through my mind, could it be something that at times, could it be discouragement? Probably somebody said something at some point in time, or the child is just beating on him or herself, thinking I'm not good enough, I'm not as good as whatever, comparing to somebody else. And because of that, it's like, I can't make it. I'm just not good enough.
Definitely, ma. And that's why the will is important. So the starting point will be for us to say, what's the emotion that you are feeling now? And then we then deep down into that emotion. But I wouldn't necessarily put any, except, in fact, there are even situations where we've had children that have gone to university, studied what their parents want them to do, and they've come back home and they have said, here is a certificate, first class, thank you, that's your certificate, this is what I'm going to do now because I've done that for you. So it's important that we find out what the child wants. In Sister Folake's case, it will be a case of you going back to your child, just as Pastor Ronke has said, exploring the reasons why. But I wouldn't put a lot of pressure on the child, especially because I have an idea of the child's age. Sister Folake's child, it's just child's age. It's not a do or die thing. Some of these things, sometimes we just want our children to do it. If it's something that is natural, they will come back to it naturally.
Thank you, Sister Wande. I'm going to call Temidayo Jurowaye. She has her hands raised up. Temidayo, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, it's not really a question. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for for the speaker, for putting all of this together. I was just, kind of in and out. And I heard the discussion about kids and playing of instruments. While it is good on paper, I insisted that my own 3 kids play instruments. Today, the one that has left university is no longer interested. She played piano for maybe almost 10 years, if not more. But now she doesn't even touch it. It's just sitting down there. Then I have another son that we tried to, make him play. He played for a year. And then he said, you know what? I'm not interested in this instrument. Can you get me a saxophone instead? Okay. So at times we want them to actually follow a particular pattern. If they don't have the passion for it, we're just contributing money to the teachers, I'm telling you. So find out what their passion is. If it's the drums, if it's even the clarinet, you never can tell where their interests can lie. We can only try to guide and direct them to something. But until they pick that instrument up themselves, you don't even have to tell them, go practice. If they have the passion and the desire, And that don't let's forget the talents as well. They on their own will gravitate towards that thing. They would go and spend hours. You would just be wondering, oh, why haven't I seen this child? They will go towards it. The same thing in the line of careers. I know how many of us are particular about certain elitist old professions that we just want them to do. If they are not interested, if they want to go for tech, please let them go. If they want to pursue other interests and desires in life, at the end of the day, just tell them, do you love this? Do you see yourself spending time and doing this for the rest of your life? Can you spend the next 30 years truly pursuing this passion or this profession? And if they're okay, bless them, pray to God that they find their way in life and will be fine. And keep guiding them. That's all we can do. Thank you very much. That's my little bit.
Thank you so much, Dio, for that. That's a practical experience at work. Do we comments? This is an interactive session. We're all learning from each other. So we encourage, each other from our own practical experience. Like anyone that has a question, please raise up your hand and ask your question. Thank you.
Well, in the meantime, I would like to ask Sister Wande, our facilitator, about children that struggle with self-esteem. How can we encourage a child like that?
Okay, again, it would have to be you using the will. Where a child is struggling from self-esteem, the child is probably comparing themselves to someone else or have not discovered their strength, their area of fulfillment. So there will need to be a lot of discussion around what are the areas of what do you love doing. There will need to be a lot of discussion around who are the friends you have. There's a particular, if a child is struggling with self-esteem, it's important that you take them through a journey of how to build friends, because it could be that maybe they're experiencing bullying in school. It could be even something as little as the way that they're dressed. Sometimes we take a lot of things for granted. It could be their hairstyle. They're looking at their other friends and they're sort of thinking, oh, this friend looks better than me and things like that. And sometimes as parents we'll say things like, oh, the child should be contained or should be happy with what they have. But we don't have to do expensive things. It's more really about acknowledging the child and then giving them psychological safety. A child that is suffering from low self-esteem hasn't got psychological safety. They don't feel safe in their own being, which means that we haven't loved them enough. If you're saying to a child, words are very powerful. If you're saying to a child every morning, you are beautiful, you are the best, you can do all things because Christ strengthens you. The power of God is in you. The light of God is in you. And you start to speak those words into that child, you will find out that the child, that's the voice, is all in the voice. That's the voice that the child will be hearing. So the child will be saying, okay, my parents are saying to me that I'm the best. I am the best, and you are acknowledging them. That's the way that I would say to you to build self-esteem in a child. And also get them to do other things. It could be maybe going to a ballet club if they are still at that age. A child's brain and everything, by the time they get to 6 years old, is already formed. So if we haven't done that self-esteem by the time they get to 6 years old, we are repairing things. So for those of us that have young children, those on this platform, I shouldn't say that because I don't want to have young children. But those that have young children, catch them in that phase so that you know that you actually love, it's the love of Christ. The relationship that we have with children in emotional intelligence is the same love of Christ. When we feel insecure about our relationship with God, it's because we haven't established intimacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when, the teenager will say to you, don't come into my room and things like that. You joke with them, jump into their bed. They'll say, oh, mommy, I don't want you here. I don't want you here. Da. You go out. You go, you do, but they know that even though they're not going to sort of embrace you and things like that, but they know, okay, yeah, she's going to come in and
Oh, yes.
Don't come into my room.
Myself and my wife understand that laughter.
You understand that one? knock before you come in. And we saying, well, this is my house. How can I be knocking?
Thank you so much for that answer. Do we have any other questions, comments? Okay, I see something here. There's a question here. It says, what about a preteen strongly to focus with tasks, especially at school? Strongly. I think struggling. Okay, let me read it first and let's see how it makes sense. It says, what about a preteen strongly to focus with tasks, especially at school, when not being monitored, seems not to retain lessons learned and struggles with comprehension sometimes, but interestingly knows about everything about soccer leagues worldwide. To apply same presence of mind in other key areas. So I think the question is that there's a preteen that is struggling to focus with tasks, especially in school, but the child on the other hand doesn't seem to be able to retain much academic work, but knows all the soccer leagues, everything about every soccer league worldwide. So the question is, how can you help that child to apply that same presence of mind that they have with the soccer to other tasks and schoolwork?
Okay, let me just show because this is a really good example that I can relate to, and I'll tell you why. But let me show this, for example. You see that child that is sort of distracted, poor listening, impulsive in his schoolwork, is the same child that can be warm, enthusiastic, can be sociable, can be charming, because that child is operating in the yellow space. So you can actually see what's happening there. But I'll share a personal story about my children. So my first child, very academic, very studious. We didn't have any problems with her. She knew what she wanted to do, and that was it. With my son, in UK, when you're preparing for GCSEs, they will give you they'll give you a syllabus, and they will say to you, this is the minimum grade that you can get to pass, and this is the maximum grade. So my son, when he was doing his GCSE, he would look at the minimum grade. I'll be saying, are you not in the same class with the person that is looking at the maximum grade? Why are you starting with the minimum grade? But all he was interested in was football. So when he, what I did with his GCSEs, and this is what I will encourage any parent that has that sort of a child, is to sit down with them and read with them. So we sat down together, we read together, we read PE together, we read biology together, we read social, everything we read together, so that he knew that I was taking that journey with him, while still supporting him to do all of his football things. When he then got into A-levels, we sort of thought because he was interested in football that we should get him to do PE and biology. I think it was the first time he came home, he said to us, he's not doing PE anymore. There's too much of science in it, he's not doing PE. So we said, okay, he started to do sociology. Remember that there's those sociology skills that he was working on. But to cut a long story short, when he finished his GCSEs and he was still going through with his football, he got a scholarship to study in America through this same football. And recently, about a month ago, he has actually just been called into a national team in America without us being Americans. If I had stopped, and this is a real life. Okay, so if I had actually stopped him from doing what he wanted to do, where would we be today? Are we hearing?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, yeah. So
Yes.
if we had actually stopped him from actually following his dreams, where would he actually be today? So and this is a personal story. In May this year, he'll be graduating, a scholarship from America. We didn't have to pay for tuition. He hasn't got a loan on his hands, and he's doing his soccer thing. So I would say to you again, just as it was this sister Temi that was saying, look at their strengths, look at their passion, follow it squarely. And you can even use that as a bargaining point. So you could say to them, I will take you to football. I will buy you the best football game in class if you make these 5 grades. They will make it because they want to do that element which they enjoy.
Okay, thank you so much. We're in the house that has sent me a message that we should also things. So it says the child could also be taken to the doctor. Ability. So we want to look at, all the areas and make sure that we are connecting the dots very well. So you could also, follow the medical, advice to actually have that child checked to see whether there's some form of, it says ADHD or ADD or a learning disability. So we'll follow the medical advice too. Temida, your hand is raised again. Are you raising your hand?
Yes, I just have a little contribution to what the speaker has said. Okay. I listened very well, and I'm totally 110% in support of what she said. Follow the child's passion. You never know where it may lead. And I'm thankful that, in this our son's case, it's all to glory. Another thing I would like to add, because I'm in the education field, sometimes we as African parents, we are so much in denial. Even after the doctor's reports have come diagnosing a child, we want to say, oh, Emike, how can my child have an IEP? In this part of the world, it's called an individual educational plan. So every child that is struggling needs accommodations, needs modifications to their learning to help them succeed. They need the IEP. But without the parents' consent, there's nothing that can be done. And the IEP is actually meant to help that child. A child can have the IEP from grade SK, senior kindergarten, all the way to university, and they have been diagnosed with a learning disability. So we should always put that at the back of our minds, that we should listen to the experts. At the school, they want to bring your child to an SST school, whatever team meeting, please be there. Advocate for your children. You know them best. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diane. We have it coming from different angles, the medical space, the educators, and we also have our emotional intelligence expert sharing with us. Thank you so much.
So before we bring this segment of today's meeting to a close, I just want to ask our speaker if she has any resources that she has developed that can be of help to us as parents, especially in the emotional intelligence arena. Please feel very free to talk about your product, your services and how it can be of help to as many parents as are interested on this call this evening. Go ahead, Sister Wande.
Thank you so much. I will talk about my product now, and thank you for giving me the permission to do that. I just wanted to say regarding the medical emphasis that's really, really important. You know, like I said at the beginning, what we've talked about a lot of things, we have to put God first. But if you are doing all of these things and your child is still not responding, please get professional help, because there are resources out there that can actually help you. So I wanted to just emphasize that point. By God's grace, I own the Strength Factory. I'm the founder of the Strength Factory. The Strength Factory is an emotional intelligence platform, and we have a lot of resources, different resources to support both children and adults with emotional intelligence. I'm just going to share very briefly some of the products that we have. Just give me 1 minute to walk through them. I will do that very quickly. Apologies about the delay. Yeah. I'm just going to share some of the products that we have. My screen is playing up, so I wasn't quite prepared for that. Yeah, I will go through them now. Well done. Let me just share my screen very quickly. I actually did launch my website this morning, but I will just go through a few products that I have. Some might not be related to children, but I do a lot of executive coaching for anyone that is interested in that. I do career coaching as well. I do a lot of journals on my website. You could download journals that would help you personally understand emotional intelligence. And there is a journal for the child as well, very reasonably priced, that would really help you sort of find out secrets around emotional intelligence. It's all on my website. I have a free Saturday monthly meeting that I run in the Head and Mind space, and we learn about emotional intelligence there using some of the growth laws. So you could join that for free. I have a session that I do for executives where we just explore problems, and that we do on the last Saturday. For those of you that are in ministry, maybe you want me to come and do a Strength Factory workshop with a group of children to really explore their place of strength. I'm able to do that. I do that working with a lot of John Maxwell's tools, and also using Nick's tool as well. This is one space that I find really, really useful. This is the space where we have children that are preparing for exams, and they suddenly become tense. They can't really perform as much as they are meant to perform. And there is a product that I have put together to explore how they can be supported and to walk through that process. And I also do emotional coaching for leadership teams in churches and small businesses as well. So really, it's all about supporting us to discover ourselves, knowing who we are, knowing the gifts that we have, and knowing how we can leverage that. And yeah, so I would put my website and email in the chat box.
Thank you, thank you so very. This is Wande Showunmi. You've done fantastic justice to our featured topic for the month of February. We can't thank you enough. We've been blessed, we've been inspired, we've been challenged as parents to take the gauntlet and make sure that we don't disappoint God, we don't disappoint destiny, as we try our very best to bring up our children in the ways and the path of the Lord, and most especially to pass on the baton of the faith to the coming generation, which is the essence of this ministry that God has called us to. So we want to say thank you. I'm very sure in the coming months, by God's grace, we are going to bring you back, and you are going to expatiate further, because I mean, what you've done in 40 minutes is awesome. We can dig much, much deeper and pull out more resources that God has deposited in you. Thank you, thank you, thank you on behalf of Parenting Plus Network Group. The Lord will increase you. The Lord will add to your grace. The Lord will open greater doors for you. In the name of Jesus, you will see your desires upon your children. Amen. In the name of Jesus Christ, it shall be well with you. The Lord will increase you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much. It was really nice to be with the group. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Now, on the chat, one or two people have asked if they could have the slides or the recording of the meeting. Well, I will have a discussion with our facilitator, and I will let us know on the group Parenting Plus Network Group platform if the slides will be available or not. But you can be sure that the recording of today's meeting, after a short while, is going to be uploaded on our WhatsApp group platform. And if you are not on that group platform and you want the recording, just get in touch with anyone that invited you, and we'll be able to send you that recording. Now, for the second segment of our meeting today, I want to bring up Mr. Kayode Akomolafe to take charge and lead us into